Hello, my name is Matthew Bergeron.
And I'm Cole Sand. Today is December 8th, and this is our final show of Watching Washington for this semester. Today, we will reflect on 2023, as well as look ahead to 2024.
Plus, we will be hosting a student panel with the CCSE, as well as an interview with Purdue professor Dr. Katherine Brownell. All of it is just ahead on Watching Washington.
We here at Watching Washington have been keeping an eye on 2023, as it has been a memorable year in American politics, with numerous landmark moments signaling a new era in Washington. President Trump has made a notable resurgence in 2023 in both the polls and in the news, with his unorthodox campaign strategy pulling him ahead in the polls. There may be only one way to end his 2024 bid. The twice impeached president is facing 91 felony charges across numerous states in relation to his behavior during the 2020 election. Any of these charges has the potential to end his eligibility for office with a guilty verdict.
The journey of former Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy, who began the year in turbulence, needing 15 rounds of voting to secure his seat as Speaker on a compromise that would later make his unprecedented removal from that seat less than stunning. These crises in Congress have created difficulties in policy for global events as they develop, such as funding to get conflicts in both Ukraine and expanding conflicts in the Middle East. This past year also featured our hottest summer on record, as the United Nations climate report from August claims that it may be our first sign of what is to come. We wrap up our 2023 recap by remembering those no longer with us: Henry Kissinger, Rosalind Carter, Dianne Feinstein, Pat Schroeder, and Jimmy Buffett. We want to thank them for their commitment to public service.
There is no doubt that in the years to come, 2023 will be remembered for the conflicts that arose. We began the year with the war in Ukraine underway. In January, Ukrainian forces defended their territory well, having recently taken back the city of Kherson. In February, the death toll for Ukrainians exceeded 100,000, while the Russians had lost double that, with 200,000 casualties. In August, the total death toll neared 500,000. Worldwide support for Ukraine is strong, but the two countries aren't currently making much progress. Moving to another war ongoing, on October 7th, the Palestinian militant group Hamas launched a surprise attack on an Israeli music festival, as well as several Israeli cities. Since then, Israel and Hamas have traded missile attacks, and tens of thousands have been killed. We have followed the story pretty thoroughly here in Watching Washington, but there have been some new developments since our last update. Israel and Hamas resumed fighting following a week-long truce that allowed for some aid to reach Gaza citizens. Israeli forces have killed more than 200 Palestinians since the truce ended, around 15,000 total. The IDF claims that they have destroyed almost 500 of Hamas's secret tunnels, many of which were beneath civilian areas. Finally, China has spent 2023 building up its military. Many believe that they are strategically preparing an invasion of Taiwan. China expanded 3 military airfields close to the island last fall. Then in September, we saw a major increase in Chinese warships and planes on the Taiwan side of the Taiwan Strait, the narrow body of water that separates the two countries. Though China still has not made its move, the world remains on edge, fearing the worst is yet to come. And domestically, well, our own Congress faced some conflict as well.
The House of Representatives has a year to be remembered. At this beginning of this year, they have voted a whopping 15 times in order to get Kevin McCarthy elected as Speaker of the House. McCarthy's control over the House was cut short in October. 8 of his fellow Republicans, along with 208 House Democrats, voted to oust McCarthy as Speaker. This was a result of McCarthy working with Democrats to pass a temporary funding bill to keep the government open. This marked the first time in U.S. history that a House Speaker had been removed in a no-confidence vote. McCarthy's removal led to a 21-day-long gap where there was no House Speaker. During this time, we saw multiple Republicans run for the gavel, including Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan. Finally, after 3 weeks, Representative Mike Johnson, a Republican from Louisiana, won the gavel. Before long, Johnson followed in McCarthy's footsteps and reached across to the Democrats to continue to keep the government open. But unlike McCarthy, he got away with it and is still our House Speaker.
The final days of 2023 are upon us, and a horrifyingly historic award has already been handed over. According to the NOAA, there have been 25 confirmed weather and climate disasters in the U.S. this year, each with losses exceeding $1 billion. These events fall into the categories of 1 drought, 2 floods, 19 severe storm events, 1 tropical cyclone, 1 wildfire, and 1 winter storm. In total, these disasters resulted in the deaths of 464 people, and the economic effects on the areas impacted were significant. Between 1980 and 2022, the annual average for big-scale disasters fell around 8.1 events a year. The average of the most recent 5 years, 2018 to 2022, hit at 18 events. Some of this year's disasters include the March 31st tornado outbreak, Hurricane Idalia in August, the Hawaii firestorm also in August, the Texas hailstorms in May, and the California floods between January and March. We can only hope for the best as we move on to 2024, but it's looking bleak considering the current events.
This year has been historic in terms of presidential candidates for re-election because Donald Trump is the first former U.S. president to face criminal charges. He has been indicted in 4 cases while leading the Republican field in the 2024 presidential race. He has denied wrongdoing in each case. The cases go as follows. The district attorney of Fulton County, Georgia, indicted Trump and 18 others in connection with their attempts to reverse Trump's 2020 election loss in the state. Federal prosecutors are investigating the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol and efforts by Trump and his allies to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. Trump was indicted on August 1st. An additional set of charges filed on July 27th say Trump and an aide, Carlos de Oliveira, sought to delete security footage from Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate to prevent investigators from seeing it. The Manhattan District Attorney charged Trump with falsifying business records in connection with hush money payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels during the 2016 election. All this being said, there was much discussion of whether or not the 14th Amendment would make Donald Trump eligible to run. Watching Washington's interview with Martin Sweet, a political science professor at Purdue University earlier this year on the same topic. Let's take a look.
The 14th Amendment was ratified in the aftermath of the Civil War, provided for equality under the law, due process under the law, but also has this provision, which is called the disqualification clause or section, which says those people who engaged in insurrection, having previously been an officer of the United States or a congressman or a senator or other public official, are then barred from holding similar offices in the future. And so the idea was at the time, those people who had engaged in crimes against the United States, insurrection, secession, who had tried to overthrow the Union, that those people would then be barred from holding office in the new United States. And that's sort of the origins of it. And the idea is where the insurrection that occurred on January 6th, among some, was that enough, and was Trump's involvement in that enough to qualify or disqualify him for office going forward?
Up next, we'll look forward to 2024.
Plus, hear what Purdue students predict is going to happen in the 2024 presidential election. Stay with us. More Watching Washington next.
The Center for C-SPAN, which is this organization, the CCSC, what we do is we facilitate like a bunch of organizations, different programs for Brian Lamb, which is the founder of C-SPAN. Anyone can be part of CCSC, whether it be through our various internships, our competitions, just to be involved, even like our student community meetings that we have every week. Anyone can go. You don't have to be communications or poli-sci. You just meet so many people. The connections you make is kind of crazy, the range that CCSC has. So yeah, it's just provided me so many opportunities to like kind of achieve the goals I have personally and forward to like whatever career paths I choose.
At Purdue University, we're not just students, we're future leaders. Join Air Force ROTC to embark on a journey of honor, excellence, and service. Learn, lead, and soar to new heights. It's not just a commitment, it's a calling. Purdue Air Force ROTC, where dreams take flight. Are you ready to rise?
I got a switch in my head. I go from living to dead. You got me seeing Are you looking for a new hobby?
Or you want to have a fun evening with your friends?
Then come climb to new heights at the Co-Rec Climbing Wall.
Hello, my name is Allison Lynn.
And my name is Emily Weisensteiner. As our year comes to a close, we look forward in anticipation of what is to come. With many domestic and international affairs making headlines, we can't be too sure where we are headed. With our presidential election approaching in 2024, who can we predict as candidates?
How do we predict abortion laws and women's rights will look in the year to come? How will our economy and the way the average American spend their hard-earned dollar? And finally, we have experienced an unprecedented year in our House and Senate. Will we experience the same turmoil or are clear skies ahead for 2024?
Many questions remain unanswered as we anticipate our country's future in 2024. Now we go to Watching Washington's Jason Choi to talk with Purdue students about their opinions in the upcoming elections. Jason?
What are your thoughts on the 2024 presidential election?
A lot of mixed thoughts, I guess. I feel like it's kind of similar to last, except, I don't know, feels like deja vu a little bit, but I don't know. I feel like I could go either way, honestly.
Thank you, Jason. In June 2022, Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. Yet, Democrats are optimistic on reproductive rights and believe the issue favors them ahead in the 2024 presidential contest, according to USA Today. Organizations and activists have sought to protect abortion rights and have been successful in 7 straight ballots, recently including Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio.
This has been such a long time coming. This campaign came together last year because we lost access, because there was a dangerous abortion ban in Ohio. Patients and families were being harmed and lives were put at risk. There was no choice. We had to win. We had to end the ban. Winning was our only option, and we did it together.
With these unexpected victories in state ballots, 2024 will be an interesting year.
As Cole stated earlier, the U.S. has been impacted by 25 climate disasters in 2023. The tragic events of 2023 have impacted many lives, cost billions of dollars, and resulted in 464 deaths. The question is, can we expect change in 2024? On December 2nd, Vice President Kamala Harris attended the COP28 summit in Dubai. Let's take a look at what she had to say.
President Biden and I have made the largest climate investment in the history of our country, and some have said the world. Roughly $1 trillion over the next 10 years. As a result, today, across the United States, we are building and expanding hundreds of solar panel, wind turbine, electric vehicle, and battery manufacturing plants. We are laying thousands of miles of high-voltage transmission lines to deliver clean energy to every corner of our nation. This year alone, we have increased our contributions to over $9.5 billion, which puts us on track to reach President Biden's ambitious $11 billion goal by 2024. Today, I am also proud to announce a new $3 billion pledge to the Green Climate Fund, which helps developing countries invest in resilience, clean energy, and nature-based solutions. Today, we are demonstrating through action how the world can and must meet this crisis. For as much as we have accomplished, there is still so much more work to do, and continued progress will not be possible without a fight.
In addition, countries around the world are pledging money to help ease the climate crisis. U.S. officials also recently announced that the Environmental Protection Agency finalized a rule that is expected to slash methane emissions by nearly 80% from the oil and gas industry. However, with the 2024 presidential election less than a year away, we can't be sure what stance the U.S. will take on climate issues. In the first GOP debate, candidates agreed that climate is changing, but disagreed on policies to address climate change altogether. More people are recognizing the impact of climate change on our planet, but it is unclear how our efforts will be continued.
In 2023, many headlines have come to our attention as far as our economy is concerned. Some unpredictable events and higher prices affect the average American, making us wonder what will happen next year. Will things stay the same, or will we experience some drastic changes? A JP Morgan financial strategist said the recession that everyone expected in 2023 never materialized. Looking into 2024, our strategists now expect that while the U.S. economy is likely to slow, it should avoid recession. The lower likelihood of a painful economic downturn should bode well for your investment portfolio and financial decision making going into the new year. Two major predictions. JP Morgan also reported predictions in regards to the Fed and unemployment rates. The JP Morgan strategist team estimates that the Fed could start to cut interest rates sometime in the second half of 2024. If the rate cuts come in response to normalized inflation rather than a recession, the cutting cycle will likely be slower than what we saw during the early 2000s, the Great Financial Crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, a shrinking gap between job openings and unemployed workers in the U.S., as well as a cool down in U.S. wage growth to less than 5% from a peak over 7%, suggests that the Federal Reserve is making progress in its fight to reduce inflation. These top strategists reported inflation in the U.S. has fallen to between 3.5% and 4% on an annual basis, down from its highs of over 8% in the summer of 2022. These strategists predict that inflation will continue to decline. The Fed has a target that likely will settle between 2% and 2.5%, a higher for longer stance from the Fed. For example, when certain prices or wages aim to keep inflation above the target rate, a normalized labor market and a lower impact of energy price swings on the overall price basket should help keep inflation in check. Despite these insights from expert professionals, our economy faces many twists and turns every year, some good, some bad. We will have to wait to see exactly what is in store for our economy in 2024.
Let's dive into control of the House looking forward to 2024. First, let's provide some background. Elections to the U.S. House will be held on November 5th, 2024. All 435 seats will be up for election. As a result of the 2022 elections, Republicans gained a 222 to 213 majority in the chamber. Heading into that same election, the Democrats had a 220 to 212 majority. Again, in 2024, all of the 435 House seats are up for election. According to an article in USA Today about the House seats up for re-election in 2024, moving forward, the Democrats are hoping to regain control of the House, and Republicans are edging a slight advantage in a growing majority. There are a total of 435 members in the House, and it is important to remember that during this process, each state gets a different number based on their population. For example, California is the most populated state and has 52 representatives, while Wyoming has the smallest population with only 1 representative. According to the Cook Political Report, which is a political forecasting newsletter, 24 seats are being considered a complete toss-up, not leaning toward either party, Democrats or Republicans. Among those 24 seats, 9 are held by Democrats and 15 are held by Republicans. According to that same USA Today article, several races are classified as leans. This means that although it is still competitive, one party does have advantage. Looking forward, 14 races are leaning blue and 6 leaning red. It's going to be interesting to see how all of this will unfold in 2024. We look forward to seeing what happens next.
Now that we discussed the control of the U.S. House, let's take a look at a forecast of the upcoming control of the U.S. Senate in 2024. Elections for the U.S. Senate are scheduled to be held on November 5th, 2024. 33 out of the 100 seats in the U.S. Senate will be contested in regular elections, the winners of which will serve 6-year terms in the U.S. Congress from January 3rd, 2025 to January 3rd, 2031. 2 special elections will be held in order to complete the unexpired terms of Senator Feinstein of California, who passed away in 2023, and Senator Sasse of Nebraska, who resigned to serve as president of the University of Florida. Looking back at the previous 2022 U.S. Senate elections, despite being considered a slight favorite to regain control, the Republicans fell short to the Democratic Party. Democrats retained control of the U.S. Senate, gaining 51 seats to the Republicans' 49. All in all, the Senate race should be an interesting one, as the Republicans are on the hunt for the 2024 Senate majority, while the Democrats will look to defend 23 of the 34 seats holding elections this upcoming November.
Up next, Watching Washington's John Waterworth and Sofia Rivera lead a panel with 3 CCSE executive board members, as well as interviews with both Purdue's Brian Lamb and Dr. Katherine Brownell. Stay tuned, more Watching Washington next.
Imagine a world where Olympics and Paralympics are unified as one, and where all athletes at all levels have equal opportunities to play and perform at their full potential.
Athletics has been such an influential and transformative aspect of my life. So to me, RISE is about ensuring that every person that has the desire to participate in sport has the opportunity to do so.
This organization is about recognition. We believe in recognizing excellence where it is found, especially in Paralympic sports.
RISE is about driving change in our community and beyond. We hope that through our events and initiatives, we can galvanize people for our cause and inspire them to create an ever-growing network to help achieve our mission.
It's about connecting people of various backgrounds and who truly care about creating meaningful change together.
We develop projects and hold events to bring people together at the interface of inclusivity, sports, and engineering.
Our goal is to promote the equality of all sports and to improve sports performance and accessibility.
Join us so that you can have a major contribution in creating meaningful change.
The political climate in the U.S. has been going back and forth, and it has been a challenge to keep up with.
This year alone, we have seen House speakers and state houses flipped, and even control of Congress change from party to party. But what comes next?
In 2024, we will see an interesting presidential race from frontrunner Donald Trump and Nikki Haley on the Republican side, with incumbent President Joe Biden likely to receive the Democratic bid.
But what can we expect with how polarized Americans are with media? We gathered the CCSE Student Community Executive Board here at Purdue to discuss this very topic and much more about what to see in 2024. The Center for C-SPAN Scholarship and Engagement Student Community facilitates nonpartisan conversation about a range of topics within political communication. With me today, we have Vol Courtney, Exec Chair, Jack Barden, Special Events Chair, and Paula Godinez-Salas, Public Relations Chair. Welcome, guys. My first question for you today is, what do you think will be significant struggles for both parties in the upcoming election?
Yeah, well, for one, thank you so much for having us here today. We're super honored to be on Watching Washington. To answer your question, I think the biggest issue that both parties are really going to struggle with coming up into this next election is going to be coming together. I think from my position, being a part of this student community, there's a real demand amongst students either at Purdue or across the nation to come together and unite and be able to pass bipartisan legislature or just be able to come across and not be so one-sided or multifaceted. So, I think a big prime example of kind of the issues that we've been seeing in Congress recently was the speakership election that took 3 weeks. And I'm not saying any advocation for one side or the other, but the fact that, we ran into this issue in the first place really kind of shows how divided our nation has really become. So I think that's the number one thing that voters are going to be looking for.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you again for having us. But in regards to your question, I think I can give you sort of one issue that I feel like both parties are kind of struggling with right now, and it's finding the fittest candidate for, this nomination. And I think it hits hard on both parties, but just differently with each one. In regards to the Republican Party, the candidate who is polling the highest right now could possibly face really, really serious legal convictions and stuff like that. So that could, deter sort of what the Republican nomination could be. And in regards to the Democrats, a lot of people have had issue with Joe Biden's age and things of that matter. So right now, I think that the biggest issue that's coming together is who is going to be, each party's nomination.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was saying, I'm going to kind of bounce off of both points. So I agree. The largest issue, at least in kind of, while we're still running debates and all, is going to be finding out who's going to be your most qualified candidate and who's going to be, your front runner for each party. Obviously, up until that point, it's going to be, I think, a lot of not only tearing each other down, but that can also bring the party backwards. Now, as Will was talking about bipartisanship, that's another thing you want to keep in mind, because that's the beauty in our government. That's how it functions. Both sides can be represented and have at least an influence. And, again, as Will has kind of said, we haven't seen that in quite a while. So I think both parties are looking for some sort of action and progress forward where they can, readily get, pieces of legislation passed, a budget passed on time, and at least, show to constituents and voters, like, we are actually getting progress made in Washington, and we can actually do the job that you have elected us for.
Right. So with the media's playing a large part in what's happening in Washington, D.C., what do you hope to see for them in their portrayal of upcoming debates, campaigning, and anything related to the election?
Yeah, I think a little bit of information about me. I want to be a journalist when I grow up. I'm currently a reporter for the Purdue Exponent, and I think it's really important that media across the political spectrum is able to give fair coverage. I think that's really ultimately what it boils down to, and it's one of those things that's easier said than done. But we're all coming to you as advocates of the Center for C-SPAN, right? So in our name is C-SPAN, and that is a news organization that is probably one of the most unbiased news organizations in the nation. And sure, maybe I'm a little biased in saying that, but what C-SPAN does is they just don't have any coverage, or not coverage, sorry. They don't have any commentary. They just purely have the facts. They show what's happening in Congress, what's happening at these political rallies. And some people call it platforming, but I call it just giving the news.
I do agree with Will, where I think that unbiased, coverage within everything that's going on is incredibly important. But I also think that another piece of that is also, not in a sense commentary, but also explanation. Not everyone can sort of come to, watch these sort of coverages and fully understand what's going on, or the little nuances that, us as like political science majors may, just be understanding. So I feel like what I'm kind of wanting to see from the media also is just not exactly like biased explanation of what's going on, but a sort of walkthrough, if that makes sense. Yeah. Just because a lot of people might, especially in this day and age, might just be like a little turned off and a little confused when watching everything that's going on, especially because we have, legal cases that a lot of people may not have any experience understanding or even seeing.
So I've watched at least the past couple election cycles, even if it was, before college time. And upon watching it and also gaining some of the knowledge I have here from Purdue, or, I took a class out in DC this summer with Will, but it's run a lot like a sports kind of show, or like ESPN would. And I find it, not only is it very interesting and it makes sense, but I think that is one thing that can really kind of turn people off of actually watching it. While it may be engaging, at least for me, I think it can kind of cloud some of the messages, or as Paolo was kind of saying, it might put words in other people's mouths or ideas into other people's minds and not allow them to understand what the true message was and interpret it for themselves. Which I think can then, kind of create this, you're in either basket A or B, and eventually, or just that perpetually pins us against each other. So I'd like to see where media would potentially give more time, or just allow audiences to understand it for themselves and interpret it for how they best see fit.
Well, Jack, you actually touched on a really important topic in terms of civic literacy. What do you all think is most important in terms of understanding what's going on in current politics? Is it reading the news, watching the news, reading a single source, or getting kind of the full variety?
Yeah. I think it's easy for us to come up to here and be political science majors or media communication majors and say, oh, this is how we think, and we're right about all this stuff. But really, I think that ideology and that perspective is really ultimately harmful, because I think you can look at this school, we're a very small percentage of this school. A lot of this school is STEM majors, engineers, pro-flight, HHS, you name it, right? And it's easy for us to say, like, oh, we study this stuff, this is how it's going to turn out. But what ultimately it falls on civic literacy and media and these elected officials and people campaigning, part of PR events, to really tell the message and tell the truth of like what's going on to somebody who may not be interested in all this, or maybe it stresses them out, or it's very personal to them. At the CCSE, we facilitate nonpartisan discussion. That's something that Jack does in his sole role. And it's really being able to have those conversations with people who aren't on the same aisle, that can disagree with somebody and learn about their perspective and not want to rip their throat out. I think that's something that we're seeing a lot in this nation, in this generation in particular. And I think that's just really one of the most important things about civic literacy, and that's something that we facilitate at the Center for C-SPAN.
In regards to civic literacy, I feel like there are a couple things that are super important, especially just like for a general audience and people who are not political science majors, as Will touched on. One of the things is, I guess, number one, being content with the idea of simply not knowing everything. I think that's okay, and I think that's what turns people off the most when it comes to understanding what's going on in our government. Just because you don't know every single aspect of what's going on does not mean that there is, like, you should not come and approach it. So I think, besides that, I also think consistency is key. Whether people are taking in their information from things that they're reading or stuff that they're watching, or even podcasts. Everyone's Spotify Wraps have come out, and you can see that people have listened to over like 40,000 minutes of audio. Even that, I think, in the form of podcasts and stuff like that, could be an adequate way to understand sort of what's going on. So to wrap everything that I'm saying up, I think, number one, not being afraid of going in and understanding these topics that are affecting us. And number two, staying consistent with it, because you could be, on par with what's going on, but things change just like that.
So I'll say, at least from my experience, coming into college, I didn't really dabble with many other sources. I typically stuck to maybe, New York Times and maybe a little CBS, and that was about it. But coming to college and interacting with C-SPAN or, even CCSE community, I found out that, if I get little pieces of information from different sources, that can help, my understanding, not only recognizing maybe biased information from one source or another, or just swayed a particular way, but it can also allow me to get more of a, well-rounded understanding on the topic, which can, of course, then allow me to maybe make my own perceptions and understand it for myself and how I see it. So I think interacting with multiple different sources, whether that be, on Snapchat stories, or you get like email subscriptions, which are most likely pretty consolidated, easy to read maybe on the bus to school like I do. But there's a lot of different ways you can get your news, and I think as long as you attain multiple sources, inform yourself on all, I think it can, help drastically with civic literacy and help you understand current issues, not only domestically, but also internationally, and especially when it comes to debate time, that can be something that can especially help with local news and individual candidates as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so my final question for y'all today is, what can college students do to be more civically engaged? Obviously, us as political science students, we're already pretty much there. We care about what's going on. But for students who aren't exactly on the same wavelength, what do you recommend people do?
Yeah, the number one thing I say, this is to liberal arts majors, this is to anybody really, anyone with an interest in politics or whatever you're interested in. It doesn't even have to be politics. Get involved. I mean, really, this is such a great time in our lives to go into stuff and not necessarily be having to be financially incentivized to do something. You can really explore passions, stuff that you may not be sure you like. And again, I think that's something where we kind of meet this intersection really, really well. Because we are a student community, that means we're gonna do the stuff that students do sometimes. We're gonna hang out, we're gonna have fun, we're gonna have little parties here and there. We had a Halloween party in the office not too long ago. That was a ton of fun. And at the same time, we have this core message too. And that core message is to be able to facilitate nonpartisan spaces. I've been part of Boiler Gold Rush for 2 years, and one of the biggest things that Dr. John Gates gives in his presentation is that he doesn't really advocate for safe spaces at colleges. The CCSE isn't really a safe space, but it's a space where you can come in, where you can be challenged, where your ideas can be challenged in a way that you're not going to leave upset. Like, you absolutely will never leave upset. You'll learn something about, oh, this is why this person thinks this way, or this is why I think this way. And you'll learn a little bit about our history too. So that's the number one thing I recommend for college students. Just get involved. This doesn't have to be our club, but it can be anything on campus. It can be a political organization. It can be a protest. It can be, if you're in media, the Purdue Exponent is a great option. Fast Track and Watching Washington is a great option. Just get involved. I mean, it's really a waste of your time and money if you're not.
Very well said.
I agree with Will. I do think that getting involved is super, super important. As college students, I also think voting is super, super important. We, we are the youngest demographic of people that are able to vote, and a lot of the times we are sometimes the smallest, and I think that voting is a great, great way to be involved. But within that, I also think that being informed is also a great way to stay engaged, even if you're for a little bit not really like exercising all of your knowledge. I still think that learning and also, like Will said, interacting with it, whether that be, with our club, because we do bring in special guests and we bring in sort of conversations and sort of let ideas and other people's opinions interact in a nonpartisan way. I think that's really, really amazing, especially as young college students, as we're trying to sort of understand, what's going on in this world that, at this time we're able to vote for. Yeah.
I'll kind of bounce off that again, I guess. I think, while clubs may be a great way to engage, maybe for me it might not be a great way for maybe someone like Will or maybe even Paula to engage, whether it be CCSE, PSG, Purdue Student Government, or other organizations. People might not have necessarily the time, whether that be a class confliction or, just in general. They might not have time. But I think even just having friendly or at least, mellow discussions, such as we are now, or even that we do host at CCSE, I think it's a great thing to have, because you still get interactions from other people. You can hear about different ideas or different kind of ideas of thinking, or how they go through their thought process. I think that's extremely valuable because, Paula may have a different way of thinking something than I do, and she might come to a different conclusion, or Will may have a different way of thinking about it, but we still reach the same conclusion. So I think just having engagement, whether or not it be through clubs, is a great idea, and it really can help, even if it's just some of your closest friends. I think it's surprising, at least to me, how effective it was, and I'm very happy I do it occasionally.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of your time. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. We also had the pleasure of speaking with Brian Lamb, founder of C-SPAN and the namesake of Purdue's Communication School, on similar topics surrounding media in today's political climate last week. Here's what he had to say about the matter.
Jumping into the polarization of media, there are networks like CNN and Fox that are infamously partisan. What is your take on these news organizations?
I waffle on this because I grew up where we thought journalism was balanced. It really never was, but we were told that all the time by people in the media, that it's fair, balanced, and objective. I can remember an old anchor on NBC, David Brinkley, who was very popular, would say that all the time. Well, it never was fair, balanced, and objective, because people in the business have a bias, and it may only be a bias of choice of what they cover. I think the best thing you can do for yourself is just study it, learn how it operates, and watch what you want to watch and don't watch what you don't want to watch. But don't listen to media people tell you that they're fair, balanced, and objective. And they still try to do it. And even those that are on, what is Fox's motto? We report, you decide, but there's another one. They call it, I think, fair, balanced, and objective, something like that. Fair and balanced. No, fair and balanced was there. They don't use it anymore, but they used to use it all the time. And you just chuckle. Okay, fine. But it is first of all, it doesn't say anywhere in the Constitution or in the Bill of Rights that you have to be balanced. And this balance thing started with the media itself. And when we came along, we wanted to be balanced. We've tried hard to be balanced. We never give our views on any politician. But I have to tell you, the most successful media organization in the United States today is Fox News. And they have the biggest audience and they make the most money. So go figure.
Do you think it's because of how they choose to report with their pretty stuck opinions and kind of the method of covering different events? What do you think that popularity is caused by?
Oh, I think it's caused by most people in the television medium and in the newspaper business. The big newspapers that have been successful are left of center. And there's a lot of anger in the conservative community about that. So when Fox came along, people said, by golly, that's my network. I'm going to go there. I feel like I'm at home. I don't have to listen to that crap on the other side. And that's the way that people feel strongly about it. So the good news about today is if you hate Fox, don't watch it. If you hate CNN, don't watch it. Don't punish yourself. But if you really want to know what each side thinks, watch them both. That's what I do. I watch all of them every day. I watch News Nation, which you probably don't even know about. I watch everything from Newsmax to Fox News to CNN to MSNBC. It's a smorgasbord of choice today. And I know that all those networks make a habit of cutting the others, but that creates clicks for them. It creates an audience, and it works.
I have Dr. Katherine Brownell here to discuss the topic of media polarization with us. Thank you so much for being here,
Thank
Dr.
you so
Brownell.
much for having me.
Yeah, my first question for you is, in your new book, you discuss the rise of cable television in politics. In the past 2 election cycles, how do you think cable television has impacted the opinions of voters?
It's played an enormous role in shaping what people understand about the election, especially if they are dedicated viewers to a particular channel, whether it's MSNBC or Fox. You see those 2 channels have really embraced certain political ideologies in terms of how they frame and how they present the election and the issues. And I think that we saw, particularly with Fox, we saw that had an outsized role in shaping what its viewers and many conservatives believed about the election. And with the Dominion lawsuit that has come forward, we see how much that news coverage was shaped not in facts, but in what they were kind of pandering to their viewers, notably also former President Trump, and really their reluctance in telling facts and telling the truth about the election played a significant role in the insurrection that followed and the rise of many conspiracy theories about the 2020 election.
You reminded me of a quote from, I believe it was a press comment at one of the White House one of the White House events. She had said the phrase "alternative facts."
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
Kellyanne Conway. This notion that you have your facts and we have alternative facts, and this is something that I do think was new to the Trump administration in terms of celebrating alternative facts. Of course, presidents and politicians have long tried to shape interpretation of events. They've had this spin machinery that has really tried to influence how people understand things as they play out. But what you saw with the Trump administration is that President Trump tried to actively create his own reality at times and sell that through cable news programs like Fox. And so the relationship between Fox and the Trump administration really did allow for misinformation to circulate in very powerful and pervasive ways.
In your first book, you talk about how Hollywood plays a role nowadays in elections and politics in general. How so?
So my book charted how Hollywood became a political force and ultimately helped to transform political culture in a way, and political parties, the very operation of political parties, where pursuing a media-driven celebrity image became seen as central to political power. This was not natural or preordained. We may think so in our modern moment, but it was a very contested development. And it required, new people like entertainers coming to the forefront and being deemed important in terms of the advice that they were giving. And so it's a very contested development. And now we have what I call the era of showbiz politics, where political power is really linked to a candidate's ability to create this celebrity persona. And that becomes a path. Creating a celebrity persona becomes a path to political power. And you could see this with Ronald Reagan, who in the 1960s had to apologize and kind of make excuses for being an actor. That was seen as something that many people held against him, that he was not a serious politician. By the 1980s, when he left the White House, he said in an interview, "I don't know how you would do this job without having acting experience." It had become it was something that he celebrated as central to his success. And so that's one of the things that my work kind of charts, how we came to value entertainment and entertainers.
So when you wrote that book, it was actually before the rise of social media.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think the fact that a celebrity can reach so many people in just a second on Twitter, or now what's known as X, Instagram, whatever message they want to convey, they can do it instantly to millions of people. How dangerous is that to society?
Well, I think that's the issue, is that valuing entertainment and entertainers in the political realm has consequences. They are not necessarily the best qualified to speak on policy issues. And the pursuit of celebrity has made getting media attention so central to politics that the actual focus of governing and passing legislation becomes really sidelined in that process. So you have those people who are not as well qualified to lead political conversations at the forefront of it. And that has, again, consequences that that then we don't necessarily have the most informed and robust public debate.
So we have, deviating the topic a little bit, we have politicians nowadays that in the past, let's say if a scandal were to break out, you would be inclined to resign. Then we have people nowadays like George Santos, who had to be forcibly removed from office just because he was riddled with scandal and found guilty. Well, I believe the trial's still ongoing.
Alleged.
Yeah, exactly. How do you think that media covers that, and how has media impacted that?
Yeah, it's a really terrific question, and I think that's where it's really important to understand how the machinery of politics works. And it's really linked to kind of this embrace, this turn towards entertainment and entertainers and image managers. And really each candidate, kind of part of the consequence of this age of showbiz politics is that candidates and politicians, they all have this media machinery around them. It's not just on the campaign trail, they bring that with them to office. And so now, each politician has a team of consultants and spin doctors, if you will, that are trying to fix these issues, trying to fix controversy, to spin it in the right way. And this new media environment that we have, that is, again, more pervasive, more decentralized with social media, affords many opportunities to kind of try to manipulate any negative, and try to mitigate, I should say, any negative publicity.
And on that note, do you think that social media, in terms of use by campaigns to reach younger voters, do you think that there's some bad that comes from that as well, or?
Well, I think that there are consequences. That when candidates or campaigns rely on new media, they can do so. They can go around the press corps. They can speak directly to voters, and that can have positive benefits. It can enhance dialogue, but that also means it's an unfiltered message. There aren't people asking critical questions, and so the campaigns and the candidates are much more in control of that message. And so there's a lot more opportunity to manipulate that for their gain, and it's not. They might not necessarily be communicating substantive issues on that as well, and they can really evade any hard-hitting questions. But it's really interesting that since, over the last 50 years, time and time again, candidates have thought about how to use entertainment and new types of technology to reach younger voters. And that has been really baked into the political playbook of how candidates think about connecting to younger voters.
How do you think social media has really played into this idea of polarization in the media, especially with so much misinformation being shared?
Yeah, it's definitely because the information is much more decentralized. Anyone has a platform. You don't have to go through the gatekeepers of network broadcast television, for example, which really privileged the political establishment and those people who are already in power. So this more decentralized media landscape allows more people to have a voice. However, the metrics that are behind it and the business structure behind it means that those people who can go viral tend to have more prominence. They can shape the conversations in a way that they would not be able to do on traditional media and kind of legacy media like print journalism or television. And so I think it does allow for clickbait, which tends to capitalize on emotion and negative messaging. It allows that to really come to the forefront, which, again, really contributes to political polarization because people start to engage in politics in this emotional way and thinking about the other side as an enemy, not a point of compromise, by emphasizing differences and division. And that is really ingrained into the business structures of social media companies, and again, the algorithms on which they introduce into the technology.
Would you say they benefit a little bit from this whole polarized fiasco, say, with misinformation and whatnot?
Yes. That's one of the really striking things I found in my book on cable television is that in 1992, MTV decides that they're going to get involved in the election and really bring issues that the youth, which were overwhelmingly their viewers, that they cared about into that campaign. And so they got involved. Tabitha Soren very famously hosts these town halls with Bill Clinton. And as it progresses, it is really beneficial for Bill Clinton because, again, he's not getting hard-hitting questions. He's able to really control the parameters of the conversation in a very lengthy format, and it's free publicity for him, too. But it's really beneficial for MTV because there's actually this one really telling quote by an executive that said, "We don't want our viewers to change the channel to get information about the election from NBC or CBS or ABC. We want them glued in on MTV." So creating what we now call echo chambers was really good business. It kept viewers loyal. It kept them from changing the channel.
Very interesting stuff. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Brownell.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that is all we have for Watching Washington. It has been an absolute pleasure this year to provide you with political news from Washington. Have a wonderful day.
Well, that's a wrap on this season of Watching Washington. We'd like to thank our instructor, Liz Evans, for all of her support and dedication to teaching us. We'd also like to thank all of our classmates for all of the hard work that they've done this season. Great job, everyone.
We all had a lot of fun working on this show. We're sad to leave the stage, but look forward to all to come in the new year. From Watching Washington,
Happy 2024!